So I'll get things started here. Good afternoon. I'm Erin Zach, the Director for Alumni Engagement, and I would like to thank you for joining us today to our Connecting with Canisius program. And I would like to welcome you to our program. And the title for today's program is the Canisius College ALANA Center, Its Legacy and Future, presented by Canisius alumnus and staff member, Bennie Williams. Joining us today are alumni, faculty, staff, and parents. I welcome all of you to our program. I would now like to introduce our host and our moderator, Alumni Board of Directors member, Michael DeMarco. Mike graduated in 2005 with a bachelor's in business management. Post-graduation, he started a career with City Buffalo and is the Information Services Group Ops and Tech Site Lead, as well as the North American Head of Entity Data Management. Mike is still active around campus as a member of the Alumni Board and as a member of City's University Partnerships, where he acts as Relationship Manager for Canisius. Michael lives in East Amherst with his wife, Casey, son, Troy, and daughter, Clara. Mike, I'll now turn the program over to you.
Thanks, Erin. It's great to be here today hosting and moderating the Connecting with Canisius program. I had the pleasure of being introduced to Bennie about 2 years ago by a colleague of mine, who I think is actually on the line today, Amia Madasu McCrae, to discuss programs and volunteer opportunities that could increase the partnership between City and Canisius. Since then, Canisius has worked closely with City's Black Heritage Affinity Network to host events and share full-time opportunities and internship opportunities with students. More recently, I've reconnected with Bennie and the ALANA Center as part of my role on the Canisius Alumni Board as DE&I Committee Co-Chair. We've started discussions on ways alumni can get involved with and support ALANA Center goals. I'm looking forward to see what we can accomplish in 2022. And now it's my pleasure to formally introduce our speaker. Bennie Williams currently serves as the Assistant Dean of Students and Director of the Multicultural Student Center at Canisius College. Prior, he worked at Lemoyne College in Syracuse, New York, in a variety of roles and ended his tenure there as the Director of Inclusive Excellence and Global Education. Bennie holds a bachelor's degree in childhood education and a master's degree in college student personal administration from Canisius College. Bennie currently serves as Vice Chair of the Association of Jesuit Colleges and Universities Conference on Diversity and Equity. He also is a board member for Habitat for Humanity Buffalo and for the Jesuit Honor Society Alpha Sigma Nu. Bennie, I'll now turn the program over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael, for that introduction, and to Erin and the entire alumni team for the invitation to be here today. To those who have logged on, thank you for spending some time this afternoon learning a little bit more about the ALANA Student Center and ways that you might be able to help and support our goals as we move forward. Looked at the list briefly of who was on and I saw a lot of familiar names. So thank you so much for spending some time. I'm going to share my screen and get started. I don't have a very long presentation for you. I want to spend some time more in conversation. There were some great questions submitted, and I'm sure folks may have some other questions moving forward. So I want to make sure to leave enough time to answer those questions. So the ALANA Student Center is a staple here at Canisius. It's been around for over 31 years, and I am grateful to be in the position I am to help continue the legacy that has been started with this office. All right, so a little bit about me. As you heard in my bio, I am a Canisius College alum, a double alum. I earned my BA in education and then my master's in education, specifically in college student personnel administration. It is now called the HESA program, Higher Education Student Affairs Administration. After graduating grad school, I went to Lemoyne College, another Jesuit institution in Syracuse, New York, and worked in their student development division. Did a number of things, worked in residence life and student activities, commuter student services. I ended my time there doing the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, also working with the Global Education Office, which supported the international students, as well as coordinated the college's study abroad programs. In July of 2020, I had the opportunity to return to Canisius College in the role as Assistant Dean of Students. Some of the work that I do in my very limited spare time, I serve as the Vice Chair for the AJCU's Conference on Diversity and Equity. This conference has been around for almost 40 years. A small number of folks from the Jesuit institution started this conference, including some folks from Canisius College. Mrs. Lily Adams Dudley, who served in the role of Associate Dean for a number of years at Canisius, is one of the founding members of that organization. And it's really designed to help the Jesuit institutions advance the diversity and equity work. I also serve as Vice President of Networking Services and Recognition for JASPA, and JASPA is the Jesuit Association of Student Personnel Administrators. So all of the student affairs, student development offices or divisions at the Jesuit institutions come together in a variety of ways to connect, talk about best practices, and to advance the work of student affairs. I did serve as co-chair of our annual conference that we have every 5 years called the Summer Institute. Unfortunately, in 2020, it was canceled due to the pandemic. And since we haven't had any in-person events, but we're very hopeful to return to in-person with our annual conference this upcoming March at Loyola, Baltimore in Maryland. On a couple of organizations, I serve as their board of directors. And a fun note, I met my wife, Jasmine Williams, at Canisius. We got married in July of 2012, so we're coming up on 10 years. We both got both our bachelor's and master's degree from the institution. While I was here at Canisius, I was part of the Urban Leadership Learning Community. And I also served as president of the Afro-American Society for 2 terms, and as a graduate student, served as their advisor. And as a native of Buffalo, I am a Buffalo Bills diehard fan and will be rooting for my Bills as we get revenge this upcoming Sunday against the Kansas City Chiefs. So just a little bit of context for you. What is ALANA? What does it mean? For those who are familiar with the acronym, it stands for African American, Latinx, Asian, and Native American identities. This term began at Boston College, another Jesuit institution. And as you can see, in 1979, some students did not want the office to be called minority programs. They felt that minority meant less than. And so they came and created AHANA. The H is for Hispanic versus the L for Latinx. And it describes the people from those various identities. It is continuing to grow and develop, and I know that that was a question. That's something I'm going to talk a little bit about in our presentation and answer a little bit more when we get to our question and answers. But a little bit of context. ALANA has been a term that has been around for a while, and as we grow as a country, we will continue to think about how to advance that work. ALANA at Canisius. So in 1989, the office was established as the Office of Multicultural Programs. It had 3 main goals. It was to assist in creating and maintaining an environment in which African American, Hispanic, Asian, and Native American students could succeed. It was to assist the campus in the awareness of cultural diversity. And of course, though, that perform other duties as assigned, right? Other tasks as assigned, to serve on committees, to serve on search committees and different things like that across the campus. In the 2011-2012 academic year, the department's name was officially changed to the ALANA Student Center. Back in 1989, it had always had the ALANA focus, right? As you can see in one of the goals, it's that ALANA focus. And after some work done by the advisory board of the office, they submitted a proposal to Vice President for Student Affairs, Terry Mangione, and she agreed to change the name to the ALANA Student Center. And I think that was a more intentional way of identifying what the purpose and the focus of the office is. Multicultural can be broad. It could also often get confused with kind of that study abroad component or the international component. And so to focus on the ALANA or the student of color experience, it got that name change. I will say that it did request a name change back in 2005, and that was denied. They were seeking to change the name to the Multicultural Student Center. And so to give you some context, my title technically is Assistant Dean of Students and Director of the Multicultural Student Center. When I started, the Vice President for Student Affairs at the time wanted to change the name of the ALANA Center to Multicultural Student Center. I don't think he knew the history of the ALANA Student Center, and also given all that transpired in the spring of 2020 and the summer of 2020 because of the pandemic, I really wanted to get students involved in that process. So I said, can we put a hold on actually, changing the name? So how I describe the Multicultural Student Center is my whole portfolio. So I oversee the ALANA Student Center as well as the Center for International Education. So the Multicultural Student Center is this umbrella term that contains the ALANA Student Center and the Center for International Education. So I hope that makes sense and helps clarify some things. I think it was important to note that out of the 27 Jesuit institutions, 23 of them have dedicated offices in their student affairs division, particularly around multicultural education, ALANA, that student diversity and equity piece. Now, the legacy of the ALANA Student Center. Mr. Sababu Norris served as the director for 31 years. He's an accomplished educator, poet, and author. He was hired as a coordinator role, and then in 1992 was given the title of director. I had the pleasure to know Sababu and to continue to have a relationship with him and to work with him while I was a student and during my time at Lemoyne. He definitely is a mentor of mine, and I'm extremely grateful for his support as well as the work that he did. A couple things about Sababu. He received the City of Buffalo's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Distinguished Faculty Award in 2020, and that was presented by the Concerned Citizens Following the Dream. He is, as I mentioned, he's a accomplished poet and author. He actually had one of his poems become a play, Have You Seen Yourself? And the Shaw Players and Company produced this performance, and Sababu was the director of that. Sababu has completed a book of poetry and prose. It is called Mama, I Understand. It can be found on Amazon and Kindle's website. Sababu, I don't think you're on right now, but I just cannot say how grateful I am for the work that you have done to advance this work at Canisius. And I look forward to hopefully making you proud in the work that I'm able to do. I would not be able to do this presentation without recognizing the labor and service that Sababu has given to this department. So some of the traditional things that has happened in the ALANA Student Center, these cultural heritage months. So we have Latinx Heritage Month, Native American or Indigenous Peoples Month, Black History, Asian American Month. Those have traditionally been celebrated on our campus through a variety of ways, social, educational, fun type of events. Sababu was big on, the educational piece, right? And so there were plenty of workshops. Some may remember Country A to Country Z. He's held hip hop writing workshops. He's brought in performers, including the IU Soul Review several times to campus. So those were things that our student body got to experience. And as you can see with these things, it's not just our ALANA students or our students of color. These things were for all of our students on campus. Many may be familiar with the Canisius College Performance Troupe that was a staple of the ALANA Student Center during Sababu's tenure. This performance troupe would go to local high schools and perform. I actually saw the troupe perform at my high school, Bennett High School, several times during my 4 years there. So we might have some former performance troupes on the call today. So that was definitely huge in Sababu's legacy, right? Sababu created the MLK celebration on campus, and we have had national speakers in the past, such as Dr. King's daughter, Yolanda King. We've also had Susan Taylor from Essence Magazine and Ozzie Davis. We've had local speakers such as the Honorable Mayor Byron Brown and Pastor Darius Pridgeon. We give out an annual MLK award, and I think I saw Cliff on the call. Cliff was one of our winners last year. This is an opportunity to recognize members of the Canisius community that definitely embody the ideals of Dr. King. Sababu created the Cultural Times Bulletin, which is the office's newsletter. If I'm not mistaken, this year we will be celebrating the 30th anniversary of that newsletter. And so folks who are on campus can stop by our office and get the latest edition. And maybe we can connect with some of our other folks and send that out electronically as well. Sababu would take students on field trips, whether it was locally in the area to maybe some soul food restaurants or to some plays or different things happening in the Buffalo area. He would also take students out of state, right? Many times he took students to Detroit to see Motown in Hitsville. And so those are some things that Sababu has done during his time here. This is not to be an exhaustive list by any means, right? I could do a presentation alone just on the impact that Sababu had, but just to highlight some things that he has done for our community. Now, as we move forward, as I try to come in, and it is, you know, I will admit, it has been challenging to come in, right, during a pandemic. So to be a new person to the community and try to get acclimated to the community, students not on campus all the time, it has been some challenges as we begin this new era of the ALANA Student Center. But with that being said, we have worked very hard to continue, again, the foundation that Sababu has laid, as well as how do we move the needle on some initiatives, particularly related to our student population. So this past fall, we revised our mission statement. We are committed to the personal and academic success of our ALANA students. And we are also very committed to engaging the entire student body as we cultivate skills to be people for and with others. And that is a Jesuit term, right? You may have heard men and women for and with others. We choose to use people because there are folks that may not fall in that male or female binary. But our goal is to create students that will be advocates for those who are on the margins, right? Those populations who are underrepresented. So how are we going to do this, right? We continue a lot of the work that has already been done, celebrating the Cultural Heritage Months, right? Continuing with the Cultural Times Bulletin, doing educational workshops. Last year, we hosted a virtual workshop series on microaggressions, privilege, allyship, identity. We go and we visit classes and give presentations to students that way. So we're continuing a lot of that work, right? And we know that given our state as a nation, that there's a lot that we need to be talking about and engaging in. One of the things that I was able to begin here at the college is a student of color reception at the beginning of the academic year. This is an opportunity for all students across all grade levels to begin to meet each other. Canisius is a small community, right? Some of our students of color may be the only student of color in their classes. And so as an opportunity for them to not just meet their cohort, right, their first year students, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, but to meet students across grade levels, we host a student of color reception early in the year while it's still nice outside. And we're able to get students to just interact with each other. It's also an opportunity for our faculty, staff, and administration to come and to show their support of our students. And so we often see a number of our administrators, faculty, and other members of our community attending that event. I was able to start the ALANA graduation last year. Now, for some alums, you may remember certain groups like the Afro-American Society or LASAF may have had their own kind of small ceremonies where the students receive stoles for graduation. My hope was to try to combine that into one big ceremony. And so we were able to do that this past year in a limited capacity due to the pandemic. But we're able to give over 50 stoles to students both in the undergraduate and graduate level. And I think that graduate level piece is important because I think sometimes we get very stuck on that undergraduate experience. And I think it's important for us to remember our graduate students. And so you'll see some of our graduate students from the teacher residency program. We're very excited to be recognized and to get their stoles to wear on commencement day. We've also been able to collaborate with various offices on campus, like the Griff Center, Student Life, the Office of Event Services, to do work around first-gen programming, right? And so those students who may be the first in their families to attend college, how can we help them navigate our campus and to set them up for success? And so the past couple years, we've celebrated First Gen Week, which is in November. And this fall, we'll be inducting our first cohort into our First Gen Honor Society. Application for that will go out soon, and we hope to have a ceremony sometime maybe in March or April. Some kind of big picture goals or things that I would love to do with our center. We're currently located in the lower level of Frisch Hall, right? And so you have to have an intentional reason to walk by our office. You're not just walking by just because, right? You either live in Frisch, you're coming to our office, you may be going to the health center or to the event services office or the Title IX office, because that's where we're located around. You have to have a reason to come by our office. If the college is to say that this work is important, right? Not just for our students of color, but for our entire student body, we need to be in a more visible space. We need to be in a space where we can get foot traffic, where we can be in the spaces with the students so that we can best help and support them. And so that's something I've been working with administration on, and I am very hopeful that come the next academic year, we will be in a different space. We're looking to pursue another name change, right? And you know what's interesting about the diversity and inclusion work is that it constantly evolves. And I don't know if we'll ever find like one kind of term that encompasses everything. But you know, I think ALANA is evolving, right? I think there are students of color that don't see themselves in that ALANA acronym. I think ALANA is a bit scary for some of our students who don't fall in that acronym, right? Some of our white students. So how can we promote our office as a space that continues to have that focus on the racial and ethnic piece, that cultural identity piece, but also on the educational piece, that advocacy piece? And so we're gathering some data. We're hosting listening sessions with students, focus groups to try to get their input before we embark or submit a proposal for a name change of our department. And when you think about ALANA, you know, our office can be seen as the diversity office, the multicultural office, but there's a very distinct difference between ALANA and diversity, right? We are the ALANA Student Center, we have an obligation to focus on those ALANA identities, right? And so we have to attend to intersectionality because that's just the nature of the work, right? We're not just single identity beings, right? We hold multiple identities. So when we focus on ALANA, we play a little bit with that intersectional piece. But are we a diversity office? When you think of diversity, you got to think of race, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religion, all these other factors, all these other identities. And so this is the conversation that I'm having with administration. Are we an ALANA office or are we a diversity office? Because there are two different things. The resources are going to look different depending on what we are. Our capacity to do different things are going to look different. And so having those conversations, what are we? How can we best represent the focus, the goal, the mission of the office? How does the name help represent that? And how do we have the resources physically to do that? I'm the only full-time staff person, and I have 2 graduate assistants that offer 25 hours a week. So if we're a diversity office and we have to attend to all those identities, we're not going to do something right. We're not going to do something well because we just don't have the capacity, the physical or financial capacity to do all of that. And so we need to have these discussions to say, what are we? What is our focus? And how are we going to really accomplish this? How are we going to put our money where our mouth is? How are we really going to live out our creed to be people for and with others? And part of advancing that work is to get people to understand that this work is constantly evolving and that we cannot continue to do the things the way we used to do them. Our students are coming to us in different forms, in different ways, coming to us with different needs. And so in order for us to meet their needs and to be the best support system that we have for them, we have to continue to change the way we approach the work of student affairs, student engagement, particularly working with our students of color. And so that is my presentation. You have my contact information there, my email address and the phone number to the ALANA Center. I welcome folks the opportunity to reach out to me if there's any questions you have or anything that I can do for you. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Mike.
Hey, Bennie, thank you for such an informative and interesting presentation on such an important and significant program at the college. It was great to hear about ALANA history with Canisius and your future plans. I'm certain you're the right person to continue moving the program forward and that you're already making Sababu proud. So without further ado, we will turn to our Q&A portion of the program. Please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask Bennie any questions. We will attempt to get to as many of the questions as time allows. So with that, we'll get started. All right, Bennie, our first question. How are you planning to support students with identifying best fit career opportunities?
Excuse me. That's a great question. You know, I think to answer that, it's about relationships. So as a newer member to the community, right, building the relationships with the students to understand what they're looking for and best ways to support that, building relationships with folks like you, Mike, to connect with opportunities that we have, right? Canisius has a broad network, right, of alums, other folks, right? And so how can we leverage those relationships to create these opportunities? And so we have this platform called Handshake where we put, you know, job opportunities, internship opportunities. The student has to be intentional about going on to Handshake to actually look for those opportunities. And not every student is going to do that, right? And so how can we best meet those needs and to get them connected with some of those opportunities is to bring them to them, right? And so City will be coming in February on campus. And so they specifically reached out to me to say, hey, we're going to be on campus. Is there a way that we can connect and communicate? So building those relationships to know when those opportunities are going to happen on campus where we can be intentional about inviting students, particularly our ALANA students, as well as other students, but to find those opportunities to get them into those spaces where they can, you know, talk to people, get their resume looked at, and for them to build and to cultivate some of those relationships. So that's how I'm doing it. I'm trying to build relationships with the students, build relationships with other partners to create this network, to become aware of opportunities to get them to the students and not just, you know, if they go to Handshake and find the opportunities, fantastic, but how can we add on to that? How can we supplement that? And for those students who are not going to go on to Handshake, how can we make sure that they get opportunities? So making sure that they're aware of the opportunities that become available.
Great, thanks, Bennie. Next question. Do you have any plans to get alumni involved?
Yes, I do. You know, again, it's been a little challenging because of the pandemic, and there's a lot of moving pieces in trying to get things situated. But yes, I would love to get alums involved. We've kind of started a little bit of relationship with the alumni board, thanks to you and Janine work, Mike. And so a couple ways we can get alums engaged. One is we often feature an alum in our Cultural Times Bulletin. And so sometimes we may reach out to an alum to ask them for, you know, do a short interview to feature them in the newsletter. And so that's one way to connect, and then we can create this network. Another way is, in the past, Sababu had an advisory board that was kind of this network of folks that kind of helped guide and lead and support the work. I'm hoping to try to bring that back, and that could be an opportunity for alums to get involved and to be on that advisory board. And alums can reach out and say, hey, we're doing things, or things are happening, and I will do my best to make sure, again, to get that information out to students, as well as maybe doing some very intentional things, you know, working with Amia at City, you know, she's very intentional. She's saying, what are other things that maybe she can come to, again, to build those relationships. And so, you know, maybe it's, you know, the student of color reception that, you know, we have an opportunity for alums to come back and to meet. Maybe it's hosting a specific alum of color or ALANA type of event, you know, a meet and greet or something like that. So those are some of the ideas and ways that I would love to get alums involved. And if alums have other ideas or other ways that they like to get involved, I welcome those. I will just say one more thing, that with the focus and work that we're doing on first gen students, I think that could be another entryway to get alums involved and maybe serving as mentors or to helping us advance some of those initiatives.
Great, thanks, Bennie. Looking at the Q&As that are coming through live, It looks like a lot of folks are sending a lot of positive comments towards you, and people seem to be excited to get involved. So hopefully we can drum up a little support after this one. So we'll move on to the next question. Will the Alumni Association continue to have networking sessions with the ULLC and ALANA?
That's a great question. So again, remember, I'm fairly new, right? And I started in the world of COVID. So I'm not 100% sure of every, thing that has happened and just didn't happen because of COVID. I will be working a lot more closely with the ULC program this year because Dr. Forrest is going to be on sabbatical. So I'll be offering a bit more support and be involved a little bit more. And so I will say yes, if those opportunities present themselves and if that was something that was done in the past, I'd love to continue that. Obviously making sure it's safe, with COVID and everything like that. But yes, those are definitely opportunities to continue to happen. I just need to know that they did happen and we'll get those back going.
Great, thanks. Okay, next question. What can we learn from historically Black colleges and Hispanic serving institutions when it comes to serving a diverse student population?
Wow, that is a great question. I think the way I would answer that is I think looking at, best practices, right? What are some of the things that they're doing on those campuses that we may be able to replicate on our campus, or not just replicate, but maybe do a little differently, right? Or some ideas that we can garner from those institutions. I think another way that we could use those HBCUs and HSIs is recruitment for faculty or for positions that we have on campus, right? We can be intentional about making sure that maybe there's specific programs at those institutions that are targeted to things we need, right? If, we have a biology program, are there specific schools that may have, very rigorous and highly respected programs that we want to cultivate relationships with or make sure that they get information? So I think it's about information sharing. I'm in a couple of Facebook groups that have some colleagues from HBCUs, and sometimes they hold webinars or hold kind of just these sessions where they're talking about things that they do. And I try to go to things that I can just to see what else is out there, what other ideas there are, and that things that that people are doing. So I think it's just important to stay up to date with the work. And one way of that is using the support from our HBCUs and Hispanic serving institutions.
Excellent, thanks, Bennie. When did the term equality get substituted for equity? And what is the difference in today's vernacular?
Excuse me. I don't know if it replaced, right, or substituted. I think equity has always been around. I think we're being a bit more intentional of paying attention to equity, right? So equality is, we just give everybody the same thing, right? Everybody gets the right to vote. Everybody gets the right to buy a house. Everybody gets the right to do this, right? That's what equality is, as everybody has the same thing, right? Equity, the difference is you get what you need to survive, right? Or what you need to be supported. So if I gave everybody on the call, right, a size 8 shoe, that may work for some people, that may not work for others, right? But if I gave everybody on the call the size that they need, right, then they would have what they need to be successful. So that's where that equality piece is. Just give everybody everything. The equity piece is some populations need different things, right, in order to be successful. Our first generation students, and there are first generation students, like that's not a color thing, right? That's not an ALANA specific thing. You can be a first gen student no matter what your racial or ethnic background is, right? But if you're a first generation student, you don't know what a meal plan is. You don't necessarily know what office hours are. And so how can we build structures that will help support those students and give them the information that they need? So again, I don't know if it's necessarily substituted for equality. I think we're being a little bit more intentional with it. There are some things, right, that should be equal, right? That everybody should have access to all the support services on campus, right? No matter what, everybody should have access to the dining hall, right? And you should be able to get there, safely and things like that. But there are some populations of students that will need some different things. And it's not this, well, they have that, they have this, we got to give everybody the same thing. We got to give people what they need to succeed. And that may look different for different populations.
Great response. Thank you for that. We'll move to the next question. What is the ALANA Center doing to promote intellectual, socio-political, and/or diversity of thought at Canisius?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mike. Great question. So I would say we're doing that in some of our educational initiatives. So this past semester, we held 2 workshops. We have a workshop series that we're calling One for All workshop series. The topics that we talked about this past year was cultural appropriation and then critical race theory. So it's an opportunity where we're presenting information and engaging in dialogue about whatever that topic is, right? And in this case, we engaged in the topic around critical race theory. You know, what is critical race theory? Why has there been some, backlash or some controversy in the media about the teaching of that? And how can we continue to engage in conversations about that? We also hosted a series called Conversations of Color, or kind of some hot topic type of things that's going on maybe in the media that we just gather and have some snacks and engage in conversation. Again, it's open to all of our students. One thing we need to be better at is marketing and advertising and getting the word out to folks. And we got to get better at making sure that students don't see that ALANA is sponsoring this event, so that only means ALANA students can come, right? And so we have to do a better job of meeting students when they're at, and we have to do that by going out into the student spaces. We can't just be in our office and expect students to come to us. We need to go out into their spaces and not to be intrusive, right? Because we got to give them their time and their space to do that, but to just be in the commuter lounge, right? Where folks can see our faces. And once we begin to build these relationships, they'll come to these different events, right? They'll see, oh, Bennie's at this event. Hannah, Mary, our grad student, Kat, our grad student, they're at these events. So that's why I'm coming. And then, hopefully once we get them in that door, we continue to engage and cultivate these topics. But those are some of the ways that we're trying to garner, diversity of thought. And our goal is to not convert people. We're not, that's not our mission, right? Our mission is to educate, right? And so how do we bring these hot topics up to people so that they have all of the information in front of them to make an informed decision?
Thank you, Bennie. Just a quick reminder to the folks in the call, if you want to ask Bennie a question, you can use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen. We'll move on to the next one. Do we have any community or corporate partnerships benefiting the ALANA Multicultural Center today?
So no, not directly, right? Again, we have some relationships that we have with some alums or some other folks from the area, but we don't have any direct partnership. So there's not any organization that's giving direct financial support to our office at all. Again, it's the relationships that we built and continue to try to cultivate to just be a supportive network for our students. But no, we do not have any community or corporate partnerships that support the center.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bennie. We just had a 2-part question come in. How does critical race theory support or influence your work? How does your work help student and the greater Canisius community understand the intersection of law and race?
Wow, that is a great question. Here's how I would answer that. I think critical race theory influences my work because it makes us pay attention to intersectionality, right? And that things are not just these one-off type of situations, right? There are multiple layers to things. And I think we have to look at the lens we use to look at situations needs to be from a lens that is taking into account the various layers that are involved. The second part of that question, how does my work help students in the greater understand? I think for some students, right, they have had very limited interactions with people of color, right? Whether that be African American, Latinx, or Native American, right? Our Native American and Asian population on campus are smaller populations, but sometimes folks haven't had the opportunities to interact with a person that holds that identity. And so some of the work that we do just offers this community, right? This opportunity to be in fellowship with people who are different. And so that's an opportunity for folks to meet individuals from different backgrounds and to have different perspectives. And I think we have to be very intentional about our collaborations with faculty and how do we support the work that is happening in the classroom, right? And so if there are things that are big focuses in the classroom, can we supplement that with the work that we do in our office? So maybe it's hosting a movie viewing, or hosting, there's a speaker or a guest lecturer on campus. Are we providing some opportunities for some small group conversations around that? So it influences my work by helping me to make sure I'm looking at the different layers that make up a situation. And I think to the second part, again, how are we engaging students in that? Is helping them to understand the intersection is just through education, right? Through collaborations with faculty and the work that they're doing. And then making sure that our programming is relevant, right? And that we're not just, I love Remember the Titans, right? But, diversity programming is going beyond just showing Remember the Titans and having a conversation after that. We showed, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. I can't think of his name, but we showed a movie last year, Between the World and Me. And so we got to keep our programming relevant. That's what I'm talking about, right? Things that are happening right now in society, we got to program around that so students can come learn, ask questions. And we're not the experts in everything, right? There's no way that we could be the experts in all things diversity, right? So how can we bring students on this learning journey with us?
Great, thanks, Benny. Kind of related to that question, well, how involved are the students in their educational and supportive environment? Did they have any input in getting their needs addressed?
Absolutely. I think, we are student-centered. Like, we cannot operate without the students, right? And so as much as we try to program, we really need student input to program effectively. And so that's where we go back to those relationships, right? And how do we, work with students to say, hey, this is an idea we have. Do you think students are going to come to this, right? That's where, going back to the question around what are we learning from HBCUs or HSIs, right? Just seeing what other institutions are doing, right? Staying up to date with the work to make sure that we get students involved in that we have relevant programming. But yes, students, they dictate how we program, right? We look at what their needs are, what is the research, what is the data, and then through conversations that we have with our students, that dictates the work that we do, right? Some students are going to be great and they're really passionate and they're really curious and they want to engage. And so they'll take the initiative to kind of seek us out and seek out opportunities to connect with us. Others may be a bit hesitant. They really want to, but they're a little afraid. And others, maybe this may not be on their radar right now. But yes, we do get students' input often into that influences the work we do.
Thank you. Can you talk about how the ALANA Center and the Diversity and Inclusion Office work together?
Yes, so my good colleague, Ms. Fatima Rodriguez-Johnson, we collaborate frequently, right? All the time. A week does not go by without us having a conversation about something. So some of our collaborations are, I would say, natural, right? So yeah, we're student-centered, right? We focus on the student experience primarily, but students will come to us and talk about their experiences in the classroom, right? Or their experiences with other administrators or faculty or staff. And, making sure that Ms. Fatima is aware of that information to help influence some of the trainings and things that she has is very important. So that's kind of a just natural way, right? There's no like direct link, right? We just, because we have conversations, frequent conversations, we're understanding what this whole community experience is, right? And so she working with primarily on the faculty and staff and like, okay, this is what we're training for faculty and staff. The training that we're providing for faculty staff is going to be influenced by our relationship, right? Because we know what experiences students are having. Ms. Fatima runs the Bias Resource and Response Team, which I sit on that committee. And so that is an opportunity for us to be a formal kind of collaboration. We had some situations this past fall that necessarily weren't, that were opportunities for us to do some education, right? And so that education came primarily from the ALANA Student Center. You know, we work very closely because of her relationship with her responsibility to oversee the HEOP office, right? And so some of the programming that we provide is directly related to some of the needs of the HEOP students. And so those are collaborations. She also oversees our MLK Scholars Program, right? Where those scholars have to do service. And when we have service opportunities, you know, making sure that there's a, you know, communication between that. Obviously, because of COVID, you know, not all, you know, organizations are open or allowing outside visitors and volunteers to come in. So we have to be creative in ways that we provide opportunities for students to get their volunteer hours. And so she allows students to come help with our workshop series that we did, right? And so students are getting not just that education, right, of whatever that topic is, but they're also getting the experience of, you know, public speaking, of organizing a presentation, and those type of skills that'll be helpful in the workforce. So just a couple ways that we collaborate with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion.
Great, thank you. What are some big goals for the center as you continue to support marginalized and underrepresented students?
Yeah, one of my biggest goals is to enhance the institutional capacity of cultural competency. And what I mean by that is to have other folks on our campus understand this work and how valuable it is, not just for our ALANA or students of color, but for all of our students on campus, right? So that in situations, it doesn't always have to be Bennie, the one speaking up, or when there's a problem, let's go see Bennie. We have people on campus that have the capacity to do this work effectively. That is what we really need in order to create change, right? And so that is one of my biggest goals on this campus. And that is why I try to get involved in as much as I can, right? I'm on the strategic planning subcommittee. I'm working with the core curriculum. I'm trying to get into spaces so that I can see what else is going on campus, but to try to help influence this capacity building, right? And going back to the previous question, that's how, that's one of our key components of my relationship with Ms. Fatima, is we're trying to build the capacity. So if there are things that we can do to provide training opportunities or opportunities for folks to grow in that capacity, we definitely want to take advantage of that. So that's one big goal. And with that, again, like I mentioned, this work is evolving. How do we stay up to date in what we're doing and the way we articulate what we do, right? Folks may have saw in the description, right? I didn't just say that, you know, the ALANA Center works for underrepresented students, but for populations who have been systematically excluded, right? And institutionally oppressed, right? That's moving beyond this kind of, you know, just underrepresented, this minority, right? We're using language that is really holding us accountable, right? It's really recognizing that this is a systemic issue. Racism is a systemic issue, and that all of the other isms, right, come from, you know, racism, right? And the impacts of that. But, you know, one of the things we have to do is we have to be honest, right? And so as we grow in the capacity to handle and to address these situations, how are we growing in our articulation of what we're dealing with, right? We are not just doing multicultural programming. We have to be doing very intentional diversity, equity, and inclusion work, right? And as Ibrahim Kendi writes, we have to be doing anti-racist work, right? So the language is evolving. We're getting a better understanding of what's going on. And so how do we move the needle on some of these things? is by changing our language and to be really upfront, be really honest with ourselves. And so as I work to try to grow the institutional capacity, that's a big piece of it. How are we articulating? And then another thing that I'll just share that I mentioned in the presentation is getting us into a visible space, right? And how can we have touch points in the entire student experience, right? Making sure that policies, procedures, and things are looked at through a very intentional lens. You know, one of the things I'll put out is that our late night food service, Iggy's, that's hopefully going to be reopening this fall. Here's my question. If you are a student in a wheelchair or a student that had mobility issues that were on crutches, how do you get to Iggy's? Because there's not an elevator that will get you there, right? And so those are the conversations I try to make sure I have with folks that, okay, great, we're opening Iggy's back up, we're having this late night experience, but can everybody access it effectively? Is it really an experience for all of our students? So those are some of the big things that I like to do. And I understand it's ambitious, but I'm up for the challenge.
Sure seemed like it, and we're excited to see what you're going to do here. Okay, a couple more questions. How beneficial do you feel the ALANA Center is? And how were you impacted by such a space when you were a student yourself?
That's a great question. How beneficial? I think it's extremely beneficial. A goal of a Jesuit institution, right? This is what sets us apart from other higher education entities, right? A Jesuit institution, you're not gonna just get the great academic program, right? So I was an education major. I got the best training in how to be an effective educator. I also got training, was taught on how to be a good person. And I think that is what sets Jesuit education away from other things. You go to UB, you're going to get a great education. You're going to be an accountant. You're going to know all the formulas, all the things to do that. At a Jesuit school, you're going to know all those formulas and know how to do that, but know how to interact with that person across the table, no matter what identities they hold, what they look like, what their background is. Right, you're going to have skills in your tool belt, so to speak, right, to be able to effectively advocate and impact society, right? So that's the importance. That's how impactful I think the ALANA Center is that it's going to help you be able to interact with anybody you come into contact with, no matter what your profession is, right? You're going to have to interact with people. My goal is to give students the skills and the confidence to be like, no matter who I come into contact with, I'll be able to effectively engage with students. And how was it an impactful experience for me? When I was a student, the ALANA Center was extremely useful, extremely useful. I came from a high school where I was the majority, right? And when I came to Canisius, I was the minority. I was the underrepresented, right? I was also an education major. So I was a male and then a Black male in education, and that you don't have a lot of. So there are plenty of times when I was the only person of color in my class. I was the only male identified student in the class. And so the ALANA Center was a space that really helped me kind of understand my identity, the privileges that I have in my identity and how I might be able to use those privileges to support others. It also helped me, gain confidence. I don't think I would have gotten involved with with being an RA if I didn't connect with the ALANA Center that really tried to help bring out some of those skills that I had within me. So extremely grateful for the ALANA Center, and I think it will have an immense impact on all of the students that interact with us.
Great, thanks. So we're getting close to time. I think we have time for one more question. If the folks on the line have any additional questions that you want Bennie to answer, you can reach out to Erin Zach at erin.zach@canisius.edu, and she'll work with Bennie to get those questions answered. So we'll move on to our final question. And you touched on this a little bit in your presentation. The ALANA acronym is evolving. What direction is next for the center?
Yeah, it's evolving. Even at Boston College, where the ALANA acronym began or was created, they're using a term called ALANA Plus, right? That is trying to be a bit more inclusive. It is changing. I think we have to advance the work. We have to move beyond this ALANA acronym. What direction are we going? It's a great question, because ALANA has, in some way or form, has always been a part of the Canisius community since this office began, right? So even when it was multicultural programs, it still had that ALANA focus, and then it was called the ALANA Center, right? So, I think there may be some people that's like, well, if we don't call it ALANA, like we're losing kind of that history, right? That legacy that has been established on campus. And I recognize that and understand the impact that has. But with that, my job is to make sure that our office is representing our students now, and how am I setting this office up for success as it moves forward. I've had conversations with my supervisor, who really wants our office to be involved in that student engagement experience. And so I've thrown some ideas around with her. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe, under a new president, and once we get a permanent vice president for academic student affairs in place, that, we have a new name. I think as I look around some of these other institutions, the use of the term identity is being, brought up a lot, and that gives us that flexibility to make sure we're giving a focus on, those various parts of identity, of diversity, sexual orientation, gender, socioeconomic status, religion, ability, right? All of those different things. We need to constantly have a focus on race, right? Our campus climate study done back in 2018 showed us that our students of color don't have a great experience on campus, right? So we recognize that as a community, we need to have that focus on race. We've rolled out a racial equity plan through Ms. Fatima's work in her office. That's gonna go, I believe, until 2024. And so, maybe a combination of race, of identity, that's where we're going. But I do think we need to move past that ALANA acronym. There are some of our students that just don't find themselves in that.
Great, thanks, Benny. Back to you, Erin.
I would like to take a moment to thank Bennie for joining us today. Bennie, I really love the direction that you're taking the ALANA Center in, and I think that Sababa would agree that it's clearly in superb hands. Thank you so much. I feel a lot more educated about what the center is doing, and I thank you for that. In closing, I would like to acknowledge our host and moderator, Michael DeMarco, and to also thank our guests for attending today's webinar. I hope everyone has a lovely afternoon.